Hey everyone, I'm Claire. Welcome to my home kitchen. Today I am making chocolate chip cookies, Chewy Molasses Cookies, peanut butter cookies. These are called lime Squiggles. These are my Phyllo Pinwheel Cookies. This is a black and white cookie, very easy to make. I'm gonna show you how to do it. I really wanted a cookie with a crispy edge, a chewy, gooey center, and the right balance between the butterscotchy flavors from vanilla and brown sugar and all the chocolate mix-in. I like to fold in milk chocolate and dark chocolate, chopping some of the chocolate so you get big pieces and then like little smaller bits folded in, and very importantly, browning the butter. No special equipment, no mixer. It was important to me that this recipe be makeable by hand for pretty much anyone. So I'm just gonna use a bowl, a whisk, a spatula, and then I need a saucepan for making the brown butter, a couple sheet trays for baking, and if you have one, a 2-ounce scoop. If you don't have one, you can use a 1/4 cup measure. Ingredients, pretty straightforward. I have butter, 2 large eggs, a little baking soda, 2 tablespoons heavy cream. You could also use milk, kosher salt, vanilla extract, granulated sugar, dark brown sugar, all-purpose flour, and then milk chocolate and dark chocolate baking discs. I have a heat-proof spatula which I use because I like to scrape the butter mixture and stir it around constantly. That is to prevent any of the milk solids from sticking to the pot and burning. The flavors of a chocolate chip cookie are, yes, chocolate, but importantly, also this butterscotchy cookie dough. And you get that butterscotch flavor from, first and foremost, butter. Water boils at 212 Fahrenheit. The actual temperature of the butter will not exceed that temperature until all the water has been boiled off. You want to moderate your heat and keep it on the lower side because it can go from not at all brown to golden brown to burn really fast. So I'm gonna turn it down a little. I can still hear it boiling now, but it's boiling less. It's becoming a little quieter. And rather than having big bubbles, I'm starting to see more of a fine foam. This is about to start browning. So now I have it on low and I am letting it go until I see a shade or two past golden brown. I want to get a really dark but not burned butter. So this is looking good. I think I'm getting to that point. I'm gonna turn off the heat. There's some foam in the way, but now you can see in the pot, these are those brown bits. You'll probably know if you burned it because 1, it's gonna smell a little acrid, and 2, it will look black. This looks great. Now I'm gonna add an ingredient you don't usually see in chocolate chip cookies or any cookie, and that is heavy cream. 2 tablespoons. It's cold. I just took it out of the fridge. I've now removed all of the water from the butter, and I actually want to add some of it back in to help build a little bit of structure. Water is what interacts with flour to create gluten, and I'm adding eggs, so there's water. There's a lot of water in egg whites, but I basically need a little additional moisture to help create an emulsified dough. This has to cool down. I'm mixing in a metal bowl, which is good for an ice bath because the temperature change happens quickly and it will transfer. A glass bowl is going to take a little longer, but just sit here and stir it because what will happen if you leave it is you'll get like solid butter in contact with the bowl and then liquid on top, and I want everything to be homogeneous. So all you need is a whisk to make this. The mixture is opaque and I had some little pieces that were colder, so I'm just whisking until everything comes back together and is smooth and homogeneous. I can still whisk it, but it has totally cooled. You can also see that now the cream has emulsified in and I have something really smooth. So to this I'm adding equal amounts of brown sugar and granulated sugar, and I'm using dark brown sugar. With brown sugar you get chewy, with white sugar you get something crisp. I just split the difference and I figured use equal amounts, so it's 3/4 cup each. Go ahead and add them in. Whisk this in. I don't need to cream this until it's light and fluffy and pale like I was making a cake because I don't want a lot of air in the batter. So As long as your mixture is very smooth and homogeneous, that's all the mixing you need to do. Now I'm going to add my eggs. These are large eggs. Whisk them in one at a time until well incorporated. You're going to see a transformation in the texture. It's going to take on a silkier appearance as the sugar dissolves in the additional water that you're adding from the egg white. You can see that once you've done that brown butter, the rest of it comes together very quickly. Next, I want to add my vanilla. I have my homemade vanilla extract here. Please use a good quality vanilla extract. I don't think you have to spring for a whole bean, although if you wanted to splurge and add that, it would not be bad. I think that a high quality vanilla extract is really key to this recipe. Don't use the imitation stuff. So whisk that in. A tablespoon is a lot, but it's such an important addition in the way it skews the whole flavor profile toward that butterscotchy-ness, I guess. I don't know. That can set aside. I'm going to mix the dry ingredients. Very straightforward. I have 2 cups of all-purpose flour. Frankly, when I'm making this at home, I just add everything to the bowl and mix, but I'll go through the somewhat advisable but also extra step of mixing them separately. Now, a teaspoon of baking soda. Baking soda is really important to cookie making for a couple reasons. Primarily, it determines the spread of your cookies. If you were to make these without baking soda, they wouldn't spread very much in the oven. And now, kosher salt. I always use Diamond Crystal brand kosher salt. And with Diamond, I'm adding a full 2 teaspoons of kosher salt. If you're using Morton, use 1 teaspoon because it's saltier. I'm going to do one somewhat fussy, but I think important step, chopping up some of the chocolate. You can use chips. I don't really have a problem with chocolate chips. I do prefer, though, something that is this shape. These are sort of discs. Sometimes they're called febs, which means beans, and so they have a more bean-like shape. When they're whole in cookies, they melt into like these sheets of chocolate. So I really like using discs in cookies. I couldn't find the milk chocolate discs, so I had a bar that I chopped up. I have 5 ounces of each type. I love milk chocolate. I know that maybe like a chocolate purist looks down on that. I don't really care. I like it. I like the sweetness. I like the creaminess. I like how it melts. So I'm using both. One thing I learned, this is something my husband taught me early on. It's like, why choose? It's not A or B, it's answer C, which is all of the above. I'm gonna chop half of each kind of chocolate because it's sort of like the principle when I make pie dough. It's like I really like having different sizes of the ingredients inside the cookies because I experience them differently when I eat them. So I really like having all that contrast in the cookie. What I really like about when I chop chocolate is you get like little dust like this. Normally this is annoying, but in this case I like it because when that gets added to the dough, it like blends into the dough and almost makes parts of the dough chocolate flavored. But then you also get like this in there. So I'm ready to finish the dough. Dry ingredients go in. At this point I can whisk it. The dough for these cookies is usually pretty loose. If your butter was pretty solid, you might need to switch to a spatula. Like my butter was pretty solid, so let's switch back to my spatula to fold in the chocolate. But make sure you get everything off the whisk. Okay. So now, I'm really liking the way this looks. It holds its shape, but it's a little bit loose. That's normal. Now add your chocolate. You can see, like, it's not a hard recipe. It comes together pretty fast once you have the butter. So I'm just making sure I get those particles of chocolate dust in there. We cannot bake this yet. We are not gonna have chocolate chip cookies. Well, we are gonna have them soon because I made a swap, but if you're making these at home and you reach this stage, I'm sorry to say, I'm gonna ask you to wait. There's an important process that happens when you age cookie dough and you chill it. We'll talk about why as I scoop them, but there's a pretty crucial step. I understand the impulse to skip it, but maybe don't. Maybe go ahead and wait. If you don't have a scoop, you can use a 1/4 cup. You can also just make them smaller. There's no reason why I can't do a 1.5 ounce portion. I'm just doing it as I wrote it in the book. Make sure you have really level scoops. And then I'm going to place them on this baking sheet. Now, because I'm chilling them, I don't need to space them out as I would if I were baking them. So you can place these close together. And in fact, it probably would all fit on a quarter sheet. So you can see this is like a big mound of dough. So why am I asking you to age the cookie dough? A few things happen when you let cookie dough sit in the fridge before baking. What's happening is the butter is solidifying, some of the sugar is recrystallizing, and there's sort of like almost a curing process that happens. And the end result is a cookie that is chewier, has more developed flavor, and like in every way is superior to a cookie that I bake straight off. I say sort of at least 12 hours and up to 48, but even a couple hours will help. If you can muster 4 hours, that's fine. So I'm portioning them out before I age the dough because if I were to stick this whole bowl in the fridge, it becomes one solid block of dough that's then very hard to portion. So it's much easier to work with room temp dough for this stage. I realize that these are giant cookies, but I do find that cookies this size give you more contrast with cookies this size between the crispy edge and the gooey, chewy center. So I didn't arrange them in the best pattern, but I have 18 equal portions of dough, 2 ounces each. One thing you can do to get a really sort of extra photogenic look to your cookies is every, oops. Oh well, look at that later. Every couple cookies, take a disc of chocolate and just kind of stick it on the top. And then that kind of melts into the cookie and will give you a really classic photo in a cookbook kind of look. So now I'm going to cover this and chill the dough. Once the dough has set so that butter will harden, you can actually take them off of the baking sheet and put them in like a Tupperware or in a bag and then store them that way and free up some space. So I'm going to put a lid on here. Okay, does that work? Yes. So fortunately, I planned ahead and I made some dough and I chilled it. Now I made the dough at this point 3 days ago. So after 2 days in the fridge, I transferred them to the freezer because I didn't want them to sit for too long in the fridge. So I have some frozen cookie dough and I'm going to show you how to bake them. So the first thing is to preheat to 350. I have a confession to make. I forgot to chop the chocolate when I made these. So these are not going to have the kind of chocolate distribution that is ideal. So you can see these balls of dough, they look a little bit different because they don't have those little tiny bits of chocolate that got distributed throughout. So this is going to have more distinct textures between chocolate and cookie, but that's okay. So these spread out and get pretty large, so I don't want to crowd them too much. I can fit 6 of these on a baking sheet. So I'm at 350. These go into the oven. I'm going to rotate them halfway because sometimes the one that's on the bottom is getting less heat, so there's less browning. So I'll rotate halfway through, and they go 18 to 20 minutes, and I'm looking for a golden brown edge and a pale, slightly shiny interior, and then they kind of set as they cool. The centers have puffed a little bit, and that's because of the eggs, and they will settle as they cool. At this stage, the cookies are pretty delicate, so I don't want to touch them. I will let them cool on the baking sheets for 5 minutes or so, and then I'm going to transfer them to a wire rack to finish cooling. One thing that you get when you age the cookie dough is you get more of that wrinkly edge, which I love. So they look great even without my chopped chocolate addition. So I'm just going to wait for them to cool. I haven't had my lunch dessert yet. I'm very excited to eat one of these, and I want to pick the one that I like best to show you and to taste. Maybe it might be this one. It has this crispy edge and this still gooey warm center, and I love how sort of browned and like golden and caramelized they get, and then the center is still soft and delicious. So I love you get like crispy, chewy, soft, plus the melted chocolate. It's everything I want in a cookie. So I'm gonna go ahead and taste. Okay, it's still really hot. I probably should have waited, but I can't. Okay. Oh my God, they're really hot. Ow. This is a good cookie. While a warm chocolate chip cookie, it's certainly up there with the best desserts ever. But even a room temperature, cold, frozen, all of the above chocolate chip cookie is so delicious. I really, really love having a mix of milk and dark chocolates in here. And then to have the contrast between the gooey, sweet and bittersweet chocolates and all of that brown buttery cookie dough there's no finer chocolate chip cookie for me in my book. When I find a cookie recipe that I really love, I hold on to it really tight because for me it's rare. And this is definitely one of those recipes. It's like I don't like to decorate cookies really. So I am always looking for a cookie that naturally looks really beautiful and is photogenic and doesn't require a lot of fuss. And I feel like this is one of them. And they have a beautiful, almost like amber tint because of the molasses. And I cover them in raw sugar. And as they bake, they get this natural crackled texture. And they are beautiful, so tasty. It's really based on a cookie that my mom made when I was a kid that was very similar, just like a super chewy, soft, delicious cookie. And what was important to me about this recipe is that it had a really specific balance between the spices and the other kind of brown sugary flavors in the cookie. In terms of special equipment, I put it together in a stand mixer. You could do it by hand. It's very doable. It's a soft batter, but the stand mixer is very, very fast and easy. Hand mixer is fine. It's helpful to have a scoop, always nice for cookies, or a scale if you want to make sure you are portioning evenly, and then some room baking sheets for baking. Ingredient-wise, this is really a pantry-focused recipe. So I have all-purpose flour, kosher salt, baking soda, ground clove, ground allspice, ground black pepper, a really interesting, nice spice to add to some of your sweet baking, ground ginger, melted unsalted butter that's cooled, molasses. This is regular molasses, not blackstrap, just the stuff you find at the grocery store in the little grandma brand jar. 2 large eggs, dark brown sugar, vanilla extract, apple cider vinegar, kind of a little secret ingredient, and raw or demerara sugar for baking. First step I'm going to do is to mix my dry ingredients. I have my bowl and my whisk, starting with all-purpose flour. This is 3 1/4 cups. Next, I'm adding a tablespoon of baking soda, not powder. Soda is very important in cookie making because it contributes to the browning and the spread of the cookies. Then I'm gonna add my spices. I'm using a mixture of ground ginger, ground allspice, black pepper, and ground clove. It's a pretty clove-forward recipe. Ground clove is very, very strong. I love the flavor, but it can be overpowering. It's really well balanced with everything else, and I think the result is this kind of all-over warming, tingly, spicy sensation when you eat them. So 2 1/2 teaspoons of ground ginger. This is a container of ground ginger that I just opened, and it's actually quite spicy, which I like. If you have really old spices, I suggest replacing them for this recipe. Ground ginger in particular can go from being really pungent to being sort of tasteless really quickly. Okay, so I have my pepper grinder, and you can adjust the grind. So I have it on the finest grind, and I usually just like grind right into my hand, and you can measure it or not. It really gives this nice spiciness that cuts through the other ingredients. You can use black pepper in a sweet recipe. Allspice, a wonderful, wonderful ingredient. Then a 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt. And the last ingredient is or the last spice I should say, is ground clove. And that is a 1/4 teaspoon. It goes a long way, and often in a recipe I'll use even less, more like an 1/8 of a teaspoon. So that amount, even though it's less than the other spices, it's so strong that it really does kind of come to the forefront. Whisk all of that together. That's the only prep in the recipe. After that, we move right into putting together the cookie dough. So grab your mixer. I have 1 1/2 sticks of unsalted butter that I melted, and now it is cooled, so you can see it's solidified. But even though it's room temp, it's not quite the same as using room temp butter that hadn't been melted. Melted butter in cookies adds to a chewier texture. Then I'm gonna add my dark brown sugar. I don't use dark brown sugar a lot in baking because there's so much molasses. It tends to give things almost like a grayish purple color, which might sound crazy, but in this case, I'm adding even more molasses, and then the whole thing actually turns this really pretty shade of deep brown. So dark brown sugar. I love the flavor. So turn this on, and you want to mix this together until you have a mixture that's nice and silky and smooth and a little bit lightened in color, but we're not going for fluffy. All right, I'm just gonna let this go for a sec. I'm gonna crack my eggs. I feel like I'm starting to get really good at the one-handed egg crack.
Try it.
Should I try it? One egg at a time. I have 2 total. Again, room temp. So once the first is well incorporated, you can add the second. Because what often happens is you have trapped butter clinging to the sides. I'm gonna give everything a nice thorough scrape down. And now I'm gonna add the remaining liquid ingredients. So that is our molasses. I have a 1/2 cup. So now I'm adding my other ingredients, which is 2 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar. And it is that extra acidity that helps the cookies to have the texture that I want, which is soft and chewy. And then 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. So just stir that in. So then once you have everything smooth, I'm going to add the flour mixture. So the book says to add this gradually as it mixes in because it's just a lot of flour and I think it would like billow out of the bowl. This is just gonna mix into a really soft, somewhat sticky dough. That is correct. You didn't do anything wrong. This dough is done. It is quite soft. And it's really not in a state where you can form it in any way. Like it's just too sticky. I want to fold it a few times with the spatula to get it evenly mixed. I can see that there's some pockets down toward the bottom. So I'm going to do that. And then basically we just need to chill this. Chilling it allows the dough to set, the butter hardens, and it will become scoopable. I really like recipes where you can just divide up all the steps. You can mix the dough, leave it in the fridge for a couple days. You can freeze the dough. You can portion them into little balls and then you can freeze those and bake them whenever you want. So it's just very flexible. It's almost batter-like, not quite. So just make sure that it's really evenly mixed. So now obviously I want to chill it. This is not really in a state where I could form it into cookies. The book says to divide it into and wrap each half in plastic, forming like a 6-inch square or so. Because I'm trying to not do plastic, I might go a different route. I have my dough. It's just easier to divide it into 2 portions for working, but these are gonna go in the fridge. I'm gonna tell you for how long. Oh, at least an hour and up to a couple days. Beyond a couple days, you probably are gonna wanna freeze the dough because the longer it sits beyond 24 to 48 hours, sort of the like structure of the cookie tends to break down a little bit. But I'm gonna show you the dough that I made yesterday. Once your dough is chilled, it becomes very firm. This is the texture at which we can scoop and roll it. So I'm gonna go with 1 ounce portions of dough. So 1 ounce is about 2 tablespoons. So then, you wanna work relatively quickly because the longer this sits out, the softer it'll get. So you wanna roll it between your palms into something sphere-like. I lack the skill of like rolling something really spherical between your palms. I just sort of don't ever do it. I don't really know how to do it better. But whatever you can manage. And then what happens is the heat from your hands will warm the outside of the dough and get it a little shiny, a little sticky. And that's actually good because then it holds onto the sugar. and that goes right on the baking sheet. This reminds me of when I was a kid, like I remember my mom would make peanut butter cookies, made the same way, but rolled in granulated sugar. At some point you might want to give your hands a warm water rinse just to like start fresh. All right, I have my 2 baking sheets and I did space them out. So one good tip if you're trying to maximize the area of your baking sheets, to stagger them. Instead of doing 3 across, I pulled the 3rd one down a little bit. And so I have 9 on each. Is that how many? Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna put them in the oven. 1 on the top rack, 1 on the bottom, and then they only bake for about 15 minutes, and I'm gonna rotate halfway through. Okay. Now that I said that, 12 to 14. Okay, so not even. And just keep in mind that these are gonna look shiny and like they're underdone, but they will set as they cool. And if you do want a crisper cookie with a little bit of crunch and not as much of a chew, keep them in longer. These are done. They are a little bit puffed. They will settle down as they cool. I'm gonna pull them out, and you can see that they have this beautiful, I'm gonna show you up close, this beautiful crackled texture. And then like they look a little bit shiny in those cracks. So they might appear a little underdone, but they will set as they cool. So I'm gonna let these cool. On the baking sheets, that's really important because they're very, very delicate at this stage and they need a chance to set. So don't try to move them. So let them cool for about 10 minutes on the baking sheets and then we'll taste. Pretty close. This is a very, very attractive cookie. I'm a chewy cookie person, so I'm gonna show you just how soft they are. So you can see, like they're fully cooked on the inside and they have a crumb. You know, there's an interior texture there, but they just stay really soft. A lot of that chewiness comes from the molasses. The chewiness doesn't come from under baking. Like it's not that you just didn't bake them enough. You bake them the right amount, but they retain this really soft texture. You get the clove, a little bit of the ginger, like they all kind of do something a little different. You get heat from the pepper. They kind of seamlessly work together. And every time I make them, I'm reminded of why it's truly one of my favorite cookies. Maybe second only to chocolate chip. Within the chapter, they're organized from less difficult to more difficult. And this cookie is the final cookie in the chapter, meaning it's kind of one of the more difficult ones. But it's only because they take a few steps to form them into Linzers. But it's a great peanut butter cookie. So I really wanted to show it to you today because there is sort of like a beginner, intermediate, and more challenging way to form them. So the first is just the classic cookie, rolled into a ball, tines with a fork, bake it, that's it. Then the other 2 incorporate jam. So the second way that's takes a little bit more work, but is just still pretty easy, is a thumbprint. And then you fill it with jam. Then the third way is the one I have in the book, which is you're making Linzers, which is really a sandwich cookie, but you have like a cutout on one side so you can see the jam underneath. So in terms of special equipment, it is easier to put together in a stand mixer. So I have my stand mixer with the paddle. For the Linzers, all you'll need is some kind of a cutter that's very small that you can use to punch out a center from the cookies.
Pastry tip? Pastry tip.
Yeah, you could do, what, you've seen the show before? Good call. You could use the wide end of a pastry tip to punch out a circle. Let me see what else I got. I don't think I have too many other small ones. Okay, ingredients. I have all-purpose flour, kosher salt, baking soda, 2 large eggs, room temp, a cup of natural peanut butter, that's very important, vanilla extract, I'm gonna use paste, granulated sugar, light brown sugar, and unsalted butter. Plus, to assemble them, you'll need your jam of choice and some extra granulated sugar. First step for the dough is to mix the dry ingredients. All-purpose flour, a teaspoon and a half of kosher salt. I like a really salty peanut butter cookie. I'm using natural peanut butter. So that's a peanut butter where the only ingredient is peanuts. So I want like really concentrated flavor. This particular brand, which I really love, it's really salty, which is what I like about it. So then for baking soda, a half teaspoon, So just whisk this together. I'm gonna start with my butter. I left the butter out overnight, so it's pretty soft. A portion of the fat in the recipe comes from the peanut butter itself, which has all sorts of oils in it. And I have a half cup each granulated and brown sugar. My light brown sugar got like really lumpy, so I switched to dark brown, which is fine. It'll just make the cookies a little bit darker in color. So then my natural peanut butter. So stir it really well. The recipe calls for crunchy, which I really love. I want that texture in there, but if you prefer smooth, use smooth. I mean, this actually is the smooth variety of peanut butter, but there's still lots of texture in it, so I think that's important. So then I'm gonna turn this on low just to get everything combined and then increase the speed. I'm going for not like super light and fluffy, but I just want it to be kind of pale and light. So I'm gonna scrape this down. It's nice and light and pale. So I'm gonna add the eggs. I'll do one at a time. So I'm gonna add a dash of, this is vanilla paste. So mix that in. Add all of the dry ingredients. So everything goes in at once. So I'm adding it all at once because I don't want to overmix, but if I were to turn it on, I would just fling the flour everywhere. So I'm gonna pulse the flour in, meaning just short little starts and stops to the mixer on low, and then mix until you have a smooth, it'll be a very soft dough. Almost batter-like. A little pulse. And then once the flour mostly disappears, and let it go. So now I want to really scrape down the bowl extremely well and fold the batter a few times, because as great as a stand mixer is, there does tend to be some unevenness as far as mixing. So you can see it's really soft. Like, we would not be able to form this into cookies very easily. I'm gonna chill it down. Make sure that you scrape the bottom and sides of the bowl really well. This area where it's shiny, that's like unincorporated butter. So that's what you want to fold in until it's all uniform. For the 3 ways to form the cookie dough into a cookie, classic, thumbprint, and Linzer, I'm gonna chill the dough 2 ways. One is just like flat. All I want to do is cool down kind of in a slab. I transfer about half the dough. So I'm just gonna kind of spread this into a block. You could do it as a disc. I think it's a little easier to keep it in a square shape. Pat it down. So this I'm gonna chill, but for now I'll just set it over here. And the other half I'm going to work into a log of dough. We're basically making our own cylinder of slice and bake cookie dough. I like to start by working it into, a somewhat long and skinny shape. So you want to do this on parchment paper, and you want to have the parchment be, it extends several inches on either side of the dough. So you need a little bit of clearance all the way around. Ideally, you're using a bench scraper. Mine are both in the dishwasher. But this is a very rigid bowl scraper, so this will be fine. You need basically a thin, straight edge like this to help you. So what you're gonna do is take the parchment paper. You're gonna fold it up and over the dough, like so. And then you want it to lay flat against the other side of the parchment paper, closest to you, like this. You can kind of use your hands to mush it down. And then you're gonna take your straight edge. So it's maybe easier if I turn it around and you see. See how it's kind of tucked in there and you have this cylindrical shape? And this is the bottom piece of parchment, and this is the other side folded down. So you're gonna hold onto the bottom piece of parchment, the side closest to you. You're gonna take your straight edge, your bench scraper, and you're gonna press it on both pieces of parchment paper, sort of at an angle, toward the dough. So see how my hand is holding down the side of the parchment that's closest to me. I brought it over and sort of started to mold it around, and then I'm using the edge of the scraper to really force the dough to fill out this shape. So once you've done that and you kind of worked it all along the dough, here's what you're gonna do. You're going to roll the whole thing up in the parchment. So you need a piece of plastic, even a little bit bigger than your parchment. Thanks, Vinny. So then you're going to transfer the dough to your plastic. I just want to roll the dough tightly up in the plastic wrap. And I'm just going to start to twist like this. And then I'm going to go in from the other side and do the same thing. Make sure you're not like pinching, dough out of the log. And already I can feel like a tightening and an increase in tension in the log and in the dough. And now I have this really compacted, tight cylinder. And the reason we go through this whole process is because the tighter the dough, first of all, the rounder it will be, the more evenly shaped, and also you won't get little like random air pockets where you slice down and your cookie falls apart because you're hitting air. This can go into the fridge. What I like to do is just kind of flatten the ends a little bit like this. You're not gonna have to slice off a lot and have a lot of waste on the ends, and then into the fridge, along with this piece. Now I have ones that I already made last night, so I'm gonna pull those out and show you. By the way, when you store your dough, especially soft dough like this, I like to stand it on its end so that not only does one end stay flat, but that it doesn't gain like a flat side to the cylinder. The cylinder is for the Linzer. That's like the level 3 cookie, the slightly more involved one. So I'll start with level 1, which is just the most basic, unfilled, unjammy peanut butter cookie with just the little crosshatch from the fork. Okay, so this goes back in the fridge. I'm gonna portion our chilled dough for the classic peanut butter cookie. I have some extra granulated sugar in a little bowl, my fork, and I have my scale. So I think the easiest way to portion cold dough like this, it's like dough is easier to scoop when it's softer, but this is chilled. So I have a scale and I'm just gonna weigh out 1 ounce portion. So 1 ounce is like roughly 2 tablespoons. I think it's just the easier way to do this. And then I'm gonna roll it. So I have my 1 ounce pieces. And then this dough, it's actually nice and pliable. It's a good temperature. It's not gonna crack, which makes it easy to roll, but it will warm up really fast. So you wanna work with some speed. So you're just gonna roll it in a ball like that. And then what happens is the heat from your hands starts to soften the dough on the very outer layer. And then that's actually good because it gives the sugar something to stick to. And the sugar all over, and then on the baking sheet. I remember doing this with my mom when I was a kid. She would make peanut butter cookies. Then you go in with the tines of the fork. You go down in one direction and then down in the other. So these cookies don't spread a lot actually. So they're gonna mostly retain that shape. And if you want to, you can flatten it slightly before you apply that fork. All right, so I'll do probably a dozen of these on the tray. I have my oven preheating to 350 with the oven rack in the center. Then I move on to the second method of forming, which is thumbprint. So I have 6 of the classic little forked peanut butter cookies, and then I'm gonna do 6 more on the same baking sheet of the thumbprint, which is almost even easier. It's the same forming, just rolling in a ball and tossing in a little sugar, but I'm gonna make a little depression in the center. So I'm just gonna get all 6 of the portions on the baking sheet and then show you how to do that. This is like a little rounded ½ teaspoon measure. I just wanna use it to make like a cute little divot in the center. And I'll probably have to do it again after it bakes, just to reinforce that shape. Obviously, I'm not pressing all the way down to the bottom of the baking sheet. So these are gonna bake at 350. They're gonna spread a little bit, not a lot. And I'm gonna go until they are golden brown and firm around the edges, and then I'll pull them out. So it'll be like probably 10 to 15 minutes.
Action.
So they're done. They're golden brown across the surface and even a little more brown along the edge. They'll lose a little bit of the depression on those thumbprints, so I like to go back in with the back of a spoon or whatever and just reform it like that. So while these are hot, I'm gonna fill them with a little bit of jam. If I were filling the cooled cookies, I would warm up the jam a little bit. But since I'm putting the jam in still warm cookies, it'll kind of melt and settle the jam a little bit. Plus this jam is not very lumpy. This is a blueberry. You can use any kind you like. Obviously grape would be kind of classic. And in the book, in fact, there's a recipe for Concord grape jam, which you can make yourself if Concord grapes are in season. And if not, then just buy, use whatever store-bought one you like. So I'll do 3 of blueberry. And then I think I'll do some raspberry as well for a slightly different flavor. So I'd say I'm putting about a teaspoon in each one. Okay, so we have our level 1 and level 2 peanut butter cookies. Level 1 is just the classic fork. Level 2 is a thumbprint. We're gonna let these cool, and then I'm gonna show you level 3, which is the linzer, using our slice and bake. I'm gonna remove the plastic and the parchment, and I'll show you how. So I just cut a piece of dough off, and actually I have a little bit of parchment that got folded in here, which is kind of you run that risk when you form it this way. Then I just slice down the side. It's like a sausage. You're taking off the casing or something. So when I cut from a slice and bake, I like to roll the log like so. I like to roll it because it helps to maintain a regular shape and not have one end kind of flatten, which is important because you want everything to be round. So you'll just cut these rounds of dough, and I'm cutting them, I would say, about a 1/4 inch thick. So half of these will become the bottoms of the cookies, and half of them will be the tops, and so for half, I'll punch out a shape, and you'll get, that'll be the tops of the linzers. And I'm trying to cut relatively quickly because this is gonna warm up fast. If you feel like it's getting too warm to slice, just put it back in the fridge or even the freezer for like a minute or two, and that'll set the outside. So there are my circles. I'm gonna pop this back in the fridge so it doesn't get too soft. I'm gonna sprinkle a little bit of granulated sugar, tops and bottoms, just all of the cookies, just for a little crunch. They're not an overly sweet cookie at all. And in fact, I think people are accustomed to peanut butter being a sweet flavor, but I actually find, especially natural peanut butter that's unsweetened, I find it to be very savory. So a little extra sugar is nice. And then here is my cutter. See, so now I'm gonna punch out a center circle from half of them. I have 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Well, now I have an odd number. So just press down and spin. Because the dough is soft, my rounded dough is stuck in the bottom of the cutter, but just kind of coax it out with a skewer like this. Keep it on the baking sheet because you'll also make like little mini bites of peanut butter cookie. I'm gonna bake these. These will bake faster than the other 2 styles because they're just thinner. They're already pretty much spread out, and they will spread less because they'll set faster. So I would say maybe 10 minutes or so, and then we'll assemble our linzers. Now in the recipe in the book, it has you, because you're doing all of the dough this style, it has you bake 2 sheets at a time, upper and lower racks, but we just have the 1 sheet, so bake it in the center. Final steps of our level 3 peanut butter cookies, just to assemble our linzers. So these have cooled. And now here is an important thing to remember with linzers. The bottoms, the ones where I haven't punched the circle out. You want to flip them over and you actually want to fill the side of the cookie that was on the baking sheet. So the sugared side actually is the bottom of the cookie, so you have to turn it upside down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that part goes on your tongue.
That part goes on your tongue, exactly. Okay, well said, Cal. I'm just gonna add a little bit of jam. And I don't like a thick layer. And also the thicker you make it, the more opaque it becomes. And I like when you can see a little bit of the kind of jewel tone color of the jam. Plus too much jam and the top cookie will slide around a bit. So that's, I think, a good amount to me. And then you just put the top one on and you have your little like stained glass linzer sandwich cookie. So this one has blueberries in it. So this might give me some issues, but let's see. And the idea of having all of the idea of slicing all the cookies from one log is that there is no like matching up the tops and bottoms. They all are the same shape more or less. And if they're a little off, that's fine. So there you go. I'm gonna taste a linzer. I think I'm gonna do blueberry. It feels like you're cutting the dough thin when you're slicing that log, but then you put them together and obviously you double the thickness plus the jam, so you get like a pretty substantial cookie. But I like that because I want more cookie than jam. And so you can see they start to set as the cookie sits, so they really become like little sandwiches. The dough is so tender. It has sort of like a sablé quality. Sablé means sandy, like it has that really tender, almost dissolving texture. It's really so good. I think the recipe itself is really easy. You can do it with a hand mixer. The key is really just letting it chill so that you can work with it while it's cold and it isn't so soft, but it's really versatile. You can make it into a classic rolled in sugar, pressed down with a fork, peanut butter cookie. You can upgrade it a little bit to a thumbprint, which is just one little extra step. Although, side note, I would make them smaller than this because these are kind of big. Or you can take a little bit of time, form them into a log, and do it slice and bake style, making these incredibly cute little Windsors. When I'm writing a cookbook and I was working on the cookies chapter, I just wanted to introduce like new shapes and forms because like obviously most cookies are round, and piping it felt like a really fun way to do that. And then the squiggle shape is just even more fun. I don't know, I feel like squiggles are kind of like a thing, you know. These cookies are called melt away, which is a style of shortbread. And shortbread at its simplest is a mixture of butter, flour, and sugar. Now, what makes these a little bit different is they have some cornstarch added in place of a bit of flour. So that cornstarch is not producing gluten when it comes into contact with the other ingredients, and so it just makes a very, very tender shortbread. So as long as you have limes around, and also you could use another citrus for this, everything else is kind of a pantry ingredient. I have all-purpose flour, powdered sugar, and I have that in two places because I'm gonna put a glaze on top. Cornstarch, that is a secret ingredient. That is what is going to contribute a lot of tenderness to the cookie, so that's how meltaways get their name. They sort of dissolve in your mouth. Unsalted butter, I'm adding a little bit of cream cheese actually to the dough, a bit of a twist on the recipe. Then I have freshly grated lime zest, fresh squeezed lime juice. I have 2 tablespoons for the dough, 2 tablespoons for the glaze, and a little bit of kosher salt, and that's it. Oh, vanilla extract. Special equipment, I am using a hand mixer. So I have that with the beaters, and then I have a rim baking sheet with parchment paper on it. And then to pipe them, I do have, this is kind of the one piece of specialty equipment, I have an open star tip, a large open star tip. You don't have to use a pastry tip for piping them, but it's gonna make your life a lot easier, and it's just gonna add nice shape and ridges on the cookies and everything like that. You will need a rasp style grater, like a microplane, for your zest, and also for freshly grating some zest on top of the cookies. The cookies aren't green, you know, like lime juice isn't really that green. So I like doing lime zest on top so you can see what the flavor is gonna be of the final cookie. One thing I like about this recipe, and a lot of the cookies in general, is that they're like it's like instant gratification. There's no waiting, there's no resting. You just mix, pipe, and bake. This dough comes together really quickly, and then it's piped pretty much immediately. So I already have my oven coming up to 350. So I'm gonna start by mixing my dry ingredients. I have all-purpose flour, that cornstarch, a common and very useful substitute for cake flour is actually cutting all-purpose flour with a little bit of cornstarch because, again, it has that kind of like tenderizing effect. Then I'm adding a little bit of kosher salt. So those are the dry ingredients. So I have some unsalted butter. I'm gonna start, Archie, so loud. What's he doing? This is at room temperature. And then I'm cutting it with a little bit of cream cheese. It adds a little bit of tang that I think is nicely highlighted by the lime. Then I'm gonna add my lime zest and my powdered sugar. Adding just a little bit of liquid in the form of lime juice, and I'm gonna add my vanilla extract to the lime juice. So it's just a teaspoon. Whenever you're creaming together any kind of butter and sugar, it's always good if the butter is kind of cool room temperature. You don't want it to be so warm that it's like starting to get shiny. So I'm just stirring this together a little bit so that the powdered sugar incorporates, so that when I turn the mixer on, it doesn't plume everywhere. Because I'm not using granulated sugar, I'm not gonna get something really light and fluffy. You really need granulated sugar to kind of cut into the butter when you're creaming, but I'm not going for a really light and fluffy texture anyway. I just wanna kind of combine everything and get it smooth. I find that cream cheese, when you add it to a dough, is also kind of tenderizing. So I like that addition here a lot. Okay. So I didn't go very long, maybe just about a minute or so of beating on medium high or so. I'm gonna scrape it on the bowl. It's a tiny bit fluffy, but it's really just very smooth and creamy. I'm now gonna add those 2 tablespoons of lime juice and my vanilla extract. Butter can only kind of take a little bit of liquid before it will separate or break. So just 2 tablespoons of juice. So I'm just gonna mix that in. And there's no egg in this recipe. Again, this is a shortbread. Usually there's no egg in shortbread. So that's all I'm adding. So you can see it's nice and smooth. I like seeing those flecks of lime zest in there. Now I'm gonna add my dry ingredients all in one shot. And now that I've added the dry ingredients, you're just going to mix on low speed until barely incorporated. So you'll have a somewhat firm dough. I'm going to get rid of the mixer and then finish mixing by hand. You see I have some kind of dry spots around the sides. This is a temperature sensitive dough. And if you were working in a cool kitchen, you might find that the dough is sort of stiff, and that can make it more difficult to pipe. So if you're having any kind of difficulties, let it warm up. So set it in a warm spot, put it in the sunlight maybe, or near like a heater. You definitely don't want it to melt. That butter will melt if it gets too warm, and then your dough is sort of kaput. But if you just find that it's too stiff to pipe, that's the reason. You didn't do anything wrong. So I'm just mixing well with a spatula. It's firm but pipeable. It can hold up to a little bit of mixing because there's so much butter, there's very little liquid, and I have that cornstarch added. It's very unlikely that you'll develop lots of gluten. I'm just making sure it's all totally incorporated. So I have here, this is an 18-inch pastry bag. So I cut an opening in the bag about maybe 1.5 inches wide. So then I put the tip inside the bag, and then I really apply some pressure to sort of force it down into the bag so that it stays in place. I don't have what's called a coupler, which is like a 2-piece little plastic stopper almost that holds the pastry tip in place. So I'm going to fill my pastry bag. Whenever you're piping anything, whether it's cookie dough or frosting or pâte à choux, you want to make sure that there aren't lots of big air pockets in your pastry bag because that will lead to like breaks in the line that you're piping. So if you can, actually try to get your dough in there like all in one piece. So it's firm enough to kind of hold. So I'm actually just gonna use my hands to get it into the bag. And now I'm ready to start piping my squiggles. I have my rim baking sheet with parchment paper. Typically I prefer to use a silicone baking mat, a nonstick baking mat that you can reuse. But for cookies, it's actually better to use parchment because sometimes, especially a buttery cookie, can spread excessively on a baking mat. So parchment is actually better. So I have some parchment here, which I'll just reuse. So I'll see if I can pipe this, but it might just take a little bit of force, or if I'm having a really hard time, I'm just gonna let it warm up a little bit. And as you pipe, the heat from your hands will also actually warm up the dough a little bit. So you might find that the last couple that you pipe go a little bit easier than the first. This is a bench scraper. And this will just help you to work cleanly because it's a good tool for forcing whatever is in the bag down toward the end of the bag. It helps to work clean like that. I mean, it's just made an S. It's kind of cute though. You can definitely play around with shapes. I just wouldn't pipe them in wildly different sizes because then they won't quite bake all at the same rate. And as you work, make sure that you are twisting the bag because that's gonna help you build up some pressure to be able to force the dough out of the bag. I think this is a nice size. It'll be like a 3-bite cookie, more or less. These really don't spread, so you can pipe them pretty close together. Leave a little bit of space because you'll need air circulation for even baking, but don't worry about spreading and running into each other. So I'm just gonna continue to fill my baking sheet with the rest of my dough, and then we'll bake the cookies. No, we're good with 3, right? With 3 squiggles. I know, Archie, I know. Got some warm dough. I think this is gonna work out great. Action. I have my incredibly cute, if I do say so myself, squiggles, all piped. So I got 15. They're not really like evenly spaced on the baking sheet, which isn't a big deal because again, they don't spread, but I'm going to chill them. So I want the dough to firm up. I did let the dough soften and warm up a little bit so that I could pipe it easily. So it's just a little bit soft, and I want it to firm up because that will help the cookies to hold their shape in the oven. And once you do that, you can probably actually rearrange them if you need to spread them out a little bit better. So just like 15 minutes or so in the fridge. Guys, I actually sort of have room. Oh my God, I can't believe it. And then we're gonna bake them and then glaze them, and that's really it. My timer just went off. So the bake time for the cookies is 18 to 22 minutes. I set the timer for 18, and based on how they smell, I think they're probably done, so I'm gonna pull them out. The cookies are gonna stay pale. You're just looking for a little bit of golden brown along the ridges, where the star tip left its ridges. So there was a little bit of puffing, But again, no spread. They totally held their shape. And you'll see just kind of at the points and along some of the ridges, there's a little bit of golden brown, but they're nice and pale. They look great. So I'm gonna let these cool, and while they're cooling, I'm gonna mix my lime glaze. Also, you can see that I rearranged them once they were chilled. You can pretty much pick up the whole unbaked cookie when it's cold. And I just made sure that they were evenly spaced on the baking sheet. So for the glaze, I like to add a little bit of melted butter to glazes because it helps to thicken it a little bit and give it some nice body. If you have really lumpy confectioner sugar, you might want to sift it. It's usually not necessary. So I'm going to add my lime juice and my melted butter. And it's a good idea to always have a little bit of extra confectioner sugar or lime juice around. If you don't have extra lime juice, you can just use water because you often will need to adjust to the consistency of the glaze. And I'm not going for like a thick glaze here. It is thick enough that it really clings to the cookie, but it leaves kind of like a translucent layer, which I really like. So it's not an overly thick glaze. So this consistency looks good. You can see it is pourable, but it's still fairly thick. So that's the glaze. It doesn't look like very much, but it is enough to coat all of the cookies. So I have my glaze, and then I have my limes here because I'm gonna do a little bit of fresh zest over each cookie after I glaze it, before the glaze sets. You can see that the bottom is nice and golden brown, but the tops are still pale. So nice and golden brown. I'm gonna leave this parchment paper on here and then let these cool. And then when it's time to glaze, I'm gonna set the rack over my lined baking sheet in case there's any drips. This has been sitting out, so I might actually add a squeeze of additional lime juice because it will set up a little bit. If you don't have extra lime, you can just add a dash of water. You are looking for a smooth, pourable consistency, but you still want it to be opaque and thick. So you're gonna take a cookie one at a time, and I'm only gonna glaze the surface, so just not the bottom that's golden brown. I want the cookie to pick up the glaze like in all of those ridges. So I lower it down, kind of grasping it by the edges. I'm gonna lower it upside down into the glaze, let it kind of sink in, but not submerge, and then wiggle it around. And that wiggling is gonna help the cookie to pick up all of that glaze, and then let any excess run off. And you want the consistency of the glaze to be such that you're gonna still see some of those ridges underneath. That's gonna go back onto the rack. And then I'm gonna add, while the glaze is still wet, I'm gonna add a little bit of lime zest. So you definitely know these are lime cookies. Okay, and that's it. Look how pretty. I'm gonna go ahead and do the rest of them, get a little bit of zest on top, and then they just need to sit until that glaze is set. I mean, you could still enjoy them now, but I think they're better when the glaze has a chance to kind of harden. So that'll take maybe 15 or 20 minutes. So then we'll come back and taste. Oh my gosh. These are the cutest cookies. There's something also about the line that makes them like very fun and easy to eat because you can just kind of like take off, you know, piece by piece. And they're just so playful and fun. That's what I like about them. Okay, I'm gonna pick one to eat. I'm gonna pick this one. I like how that's kind of also like a one-hand cookie. So the glaze is set. It's a very good shortbread. Super tender. It has that kind of dissolving texture that Meltaways are known for, and great lime flavor. The center of the cookie has retained a little bit of moisture, but it's cooked all the way through. Really good. The only thing you really need is that star tip. And remember, the dough has to be a kind of warm room temperature for it to be pipeable. So if you have any issues, just set it in a warm spot. That's kind of the only pitfall here. Other than that, so easy, so much fun to make, and so much fun to eat. And that's really kind of the best kind of recipe. Palmiers are one of my favorite cookies. It's made from puff pastry or pie dough. And so it's this very flaky cookie that you cut crosswise and the layers kind of separate. Oh yeah, check out our episode where I made palmiers. But pie dough and puff pastry are not everyone's cup of tea. And it's not the easiest thing to make. There's a lot of technique that goes into making pie dough or pastry. So I wanted to sort of develop like a more foolproof, totally reliable recipe for an incredibly buttery, flaky cookie. And this is it. So Phyllo is an incredible store-bought product. I love using Phyllo. It's used a lot in Greek, Turkish, and other Middle Eastern pastry, and also savory recipes. It's so reliable. Unlike pastry, you don't have to keep it cold, so there's no temperature issues. You can just work with it at room temp. The basic method is I'm going to stack and roll phyllo, and it's gonna make this very, very fine kind of spiral pinwheel cookie. And it bakes up flaky and golden and crispy every time, no matter what. And you get the most impressive cookie, and it looks really cool too. A very short ingredient list for this recipe. It's just 4 ingredients, and one of them is salt. So under this damp kitchen towel, I have 9 sheets of store-bought frozen phyllo that have thawed. So there's a ton of different brands of phyllo on the market. I like the ones that are 13 by 18, nice big sheets of phyllo. So I have those right here, and they're covered with a damp towel just to prevent them from drying out, which makes it hard to handle. Then I have 10 tablespoons of unsalted butter, melted and cooled. Oh, I forgot okay, it's actually 5 ingredients, fine. I couldn't see the cardamom over there. I have some cardamom, so I add a little bit of cardamom spice to the sugar. You could use cinnamon or a different warm spice if you prefer. I have 3/4 of a cup of demerara sugar and a little bit of salt, and that's it. This recipe, you'll need very little in the way of equipment. I have a pastry brush for brushing butter across the phyllo. I'm gonna work on a large piece of parchment paper. You just need the parchment to be the same size or a little bit bigger than your sheets of phyllo. Maroon baking sheet lined with more parchment, and you'll just need like a serrated knife and a cutting board to slice the cookies. So I'm gonna start on my piece of parchment here. I'm gonna put a sheet of phyllo down. You do wanna work carefully with it because it is delicate. So it's just a very easy thing to tear. So I have my demerara sugar. Basically, I'm gonna layer in between all the sheets of phyllo, melted butter, and demerara sugar. So what happens in the oven is those layers kind of fuse and mingle and make this kind of like caramelized cookie. And I'm gonna add my cardamom to the sugar, as well as a pinch of salt, which is just gonna help to bring out the flavor of everything. So I just wanna mix all of this together. Now, depending on the brand of phyllo that you use, you might have sheets that are a slightly different size, maybe most likely smaller than this. Still use all the quantities that the recipe calls for, and then just follow the recipe, which tells you how much you're gonna put on each layer, and you just might have a little bit left over at the end, which is fine. Or you could add more layers of phyllo, it's up to you. So I have my layer of phyllo down, and you see that I have it oriented vertically. So that's just the easiest way to work with this. I'm gonna take now my butter and my pastry brush, and I'm going to lightly brush the entire sheet of phyllo with butter. But just keep in mind that you don't have to cover every single square inch. As long as you have it mostly coated, that's fine. I have my sugar. I'm gonna sprinkle about 1.5 tablespoons of my spiced demerara sugar over the surface. And it helps if you sprinkle from up high because then the granules separate as they fall. So I'm just kind of eyeballing 1/2. Then I'm gonna grab another sheet of phyllo and gently lay this on top of the first. Try to line up the sides if you can. And remember to keep all the other ones covered as you work. Now, same thing, more butter and more sugar on this layer. So now that I have 2 sheets stacked with layers of butter and sugar in between, I'm gonna start to roll this up. So now the only thing that's a little bit tricky about this recipe is you wanna try to roll pretty tightly. That's a little bit more difficult at this early stage. And I have a little bit of drying out along the edges just because this has been sitting out. So don't worry if it cracks at this stage, that's actually not that important. I fold it a little bit at the end like this, just to kind of get it rolling. And then I'm gonna fold really pretty tightly if I can. And you see that I'm getting some wrinkles here, that's totally fine. The phyllo can just kind of roll back onto itself. You wanna just make sort of a tight log if you can. And that's why you're working on parchment paper. So if you need to, you can use the parchment to help you move it around. Okay, so now that I have this roll, I'm gonna take it off the parchment, set it to the side. And now I'm gonna make another stack of 2. If you have some sheets tear, especially toward the beginning, when you're doing your first couple stacks, it's not a big deal because it's gonna get rolled up. So a lot of times you can kind of hide any cracks. So same process, butter, then another 1.5 tablespoons of sugar. My second sheet, which is really my 4th, is gonna go on top. When all is said and done, you are going to have 4 stacks of 2, so 8 sheets total that you are going to roll up. And then there's actually 9 sheets that the recipe calls for, so I'll show you what to do with the last sheet. And as I'm brushing, I'm really not applying any force onto the brush. I'm really just letting the bristles super lightly run across the pastry because I don't want to tear it. If you find that your pastry brush, maybe the bristles are kind of stiff and that you're tearing it, you can try dabbing rather than brushing. That might help. Okay, more sugar. So I have my second stack of 2 pieces of phyllo. Now I'm going to take that first roll, place it at the base of the current roll, and now I'm going to roll the second stack around the first. So it's easier at this point because I have something to kind of get it going. And again, you want to roll pretty much as tightly as you can. And if you get these wrinkles in here, that's totally fine. It kind of actually adds visual interest to the final cookies. So that's our second stack rolled up. And I'm going to do that now 2 more times with sheets 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. I think this is one of those recipes where it is really simple, truly a few ingredients, but it's the kind of thing where I think it really helps to see it because it's just a little bit more difficult to translate the method into a written recipe. So these are sheets 5 and 6, stack number 3. My roll goes down. Make sure you line it up. And this is where it becomes very helpful to have that parchment paper. So you can kind of use it to start. Now I'm going to do my final stack of sheets 7 and 8, and I'm going to use the rest of the sugar. So this is sheet number 8. This one was broken. You can use a broken piece of phyllo as long as it is the second sheet in the stack. I'm just going to press that back together. It's very common to have torn pieces of phyllo because it's so delicate. Sometimes, and the way that it comes packaged is it's in a roll, like it's in its own kind of little spiral. And it's just very common that like sometimes they fold onto themselves and then when you go to unfold it, there's a tear that happens. It's just part of what you get with phyllo. You know, tears here and there is very normal. So while you're working, if your butter starts to harden, just zap it in the microwave or put it in a warm spot because you don't want it to be hot, but you just want to make sure it stays liquid. So I have a couple tablespoons of butter left. That's going to be saved for the final sheet of phyllo, but I'm going to use my remaining sugar. It's probably not exactly a tablespoon and a half, but it's pretty close. The idea is you're just kind of distributing the sugar evenly in between the 8 sheets of phyllo. So now my roll goes on just like we've been doing, same thing. And now that tear is just going to get rolled up in between the pieces.
Who made these at your party?
I made them. I made all the sweets. That's Archie playing with his toy. Good, Archie. Good playing with your toy. So now I have my 8 sheets of phyllo all rolled up onto each other in this nice spiral. It's important that your 9th sheet is more or less intact. I have one tiny tear in here, which I think will be okay. So for this final piece, I'm just gonna butter it. I'm not gonna add any sugar. And the idea of this final piece is that I'm gonna roll the entire log in one last piece of phyllo. This is just an extra layer to seal the roll. When it comes to the slicing, it's just really easy to tear it. So this is just kind of designed to be like a final solid piece. There's no sugar to get in the way. Now I'm going to place the roll on top and roll it just as I did before, but again, I have no sugar. So this is just going to really adhere to the phyllo roll and onto itself. So now that I have the whole thing rolled up, I'm gonna actually just roll it the other direction and wrap it up in the parchment paper to protect it. It doesn't have to be tight, you just basically don't want it to dry out or be exposed to the air. So that's the whole assembly process. Now I just want to chill this, which is going to make it easier to slice. So when I chill it, the butter will firm up and the whole thing will just hold its shape better when I go to cut it. So I'm going to pop it into the, I can't remember if it says fridge or freezer. I think that's fridge. Freezer, okay, interesting. So the best way to do that is to put it on a cutting board for transport. And then, where'd that towel go? Gonna just drape the towel over it to prevent the sides from drying out. And this is gonna go into the freezer and I wanna just chill it until it's nice and solid, probably like 15 minutes. Don't freeze it until the whole thing is solid though, because then your phyllo will probably break. Where is this gonna go? Oh damn. Is that getting crushed? No, I'll just leave these out for now. And cut. It's been at least 15 minutes, so I'm gonna grab the roll from the freezer and then I have a serrated knife here for slicing. These bake at 350. I'm just gonna preheat my oven. Make sure you have a rack in the center. This recipe makes, depending on how you slice your log of phyllo, like 18 to 22 cookies, but they'll all fit on one sheet tray because they don't spread at all. How frozen solid are we? All right, I think we're good. I have it right here on the cutting board, which is convenient because I'm gonna slice them just as is. So I'm unrolling them, and it's normal that the roll will get like a flat area where it's been resting. The cookies are not really perfectly round because the roll is always going to have some like give to it and then kind of settle. But once they're on the baking sheet, you can kind of mold them into a little bit more of a circle. It doesn't matter. You can keep them as ovals too. They look really good that way. These do not puff. These don't spread at all. They pretty much stay exactly the same size. They even might shrink a tiny bit because there's moisture loss. So they stay exactly as is. So it's actually those little tiny air pockets in between the layers of phyllo that are going to produce that like really crunchy, crispy, kind of shattering texture.
Have you ever tried to bake it like that?
No.
What would happen?
It would probably be good. It might stay a little raw in the center though, because it's so tightly rolled, it might not bake all the way through. So I'm going to start to slice, and I'm going to cut them about a 1/2 inch thick, but I'm going to start by slicing off just this kind of like irregular edge because I want to expose a clean cut surface. So I'm just going to slice just those little like shreds off. Now, if as you slice, there's some tearing of the phyllo, it's really okay because there's like no movement of this dough as it bakes. You'll just press it back into place and get it on your baking sheet. So at this point, don't stress out too much if you start to get some tearing. So I like to use kind of long strokes. Look at the spiral. This looks pretty good, right? So then onto the baking sheet. It's a little bit even more of a triangular shape because of how I'm holding it and how it's flattening on the cutting board. But once you have it sliced, you can just sort of, give it a little poke. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish slicing, just, like straight through the entire log, about 1/2 inch thick cookies. I'm gonna get them all evenly spaced on the baking sheet and then directly into the oven. Because I'm using phyllo, it does not have to be cold. Room temperature is totally fine.
And then it's just like that? You don't like put butter over the top, no sugar
Nope.
drizzled over?
Mm-mm. There's plenty of butter in here and plenty of sugar. You just go in as is. I got 20 pinwheels exactly, so I have them all lined up in a 5x4 grid, so evenly spaced. They don't expand at all. These are gonna bake until they're golden brown, and what's so great about phyllo is how evenly it bakes. And it doesn't take very long, around 12 minutes. I definitely told you the wrong time. These baked for about 20 minutes. I don't know where I got 12 from. The top toasts and gets golden brown, and as they bake, the butter and sugar sort of like settle to the bottom. So the bottom is always a little bit darker, so just know that you might think they look paler than they really are. So I always kind of peek underneath. Some of that outer layer, that 9th piece of phyllo, unraveled a little bit, which doesn't bother me. I think they look kind of cool, but I also like it because I like to peel it off and snack on it. I think it could have gone even longer and gotten a little bit darker, but you can see that there's this kind of glassy layer of like caramelized sugar, where the butter mixed with the sugar, it just looks so good. And the entire thing is this shattering texture, this like very crunchy. They just look so cool. The cardamom flavor makes these a great accompaniment to tea or coffee. So like such a nice afternoon snack. This is sort of like an eat over the sink kind of cookie. It's so shattering and crispy, but not the least bit dry because of all of that butter. And lightly sweet, definitely not like an overly sweet cookie. Caramelly, really good. This cookie is in What's for Dessert, and this was a book where I really tried to leverage store-bought ingredients. And phyllo was something that I really made it a point to employ in a couple different recipes because it's such a great product with just a couple of additional ingredients. It's totally transformed into truly like the crispiest, butteriest cookie you'll ever make. Like, look at the layers. I would have tea with this, but you could definitely have coffee with it. Harris wants me to write a cookie book, and that could be a chapter. Tea and coffee cookies. So good, so delicious, and I think also like incredibly impressive. It's really kind of one of my favorite cookies in the entire book, and maybe that I've ever made. It's a little bit of a misnomer, because it's as much cake as it is cookie. It's basically like a very stiff cake batter that you bake, and it kind of spreads out on the baking sheet, and you turn it over and you ice the flat side. So you end up with this kind of slightly domed, really cakey, delicious, sort of light cookie. Is it cake or is it cookie? It's kind of both. I decided to do a version in What's for Dessert that is blue and white, named for the blueberry half. So this is like half blueberry icing, half vanilla, and then the whole thing has lemon juice and lemon zest in it. So to me, this is like a fruit-forward take on the black and white cookie. But today I just really wanted to show you the classic. It's really fun. I've really been talking for a long time about the black and white cookie. The caffeine, you know, it's kicked in. Very straightforward. I know I always say that, but just kind of some pantry staples. I have all-purpose flour, 2 large eggs, baking soda, kosher salt, baking powder, buttermilk, granulated sugar, room temp butter, and vanilla extract. For the fondant or the icing, I have confectioner's sugar, 2 tablespoons light corn syrup, 2 tablespoons milk, 2 tablespoons unsweetened cocoa powder, and I'm also gonna add some vanilla and some boiling water, which I don't have out at the moment. The only special equipment you'll need is a hand mixer. You could very easily do it in a stand mixer. Either one is fine. So I have that right here, and then you'll just need some rim baking sheets for baking the cookies. The scoop is not required, but it is recommended.
I didn't get the scoop.
The scoop.
Should I get a shot of the scoop?
When you look at your arm, it's kind of like a red and white cookie.
That's so mean. It's really here is really bad. It's really bad. Does it look like I'm wearing red sleeves? That's what I said. Does it look like that?
No.
Can you color correct that? Let's start on the cookie dough cake batter. It's really cake batter, truly. So I'm just gonna call it that. So I'm gonna mix my dry ingredients. I have my all-purpose flour. This is 2 cups. Then I have my baking soda, baking powder, half teaspoon of each, and then my kosher salt. I'm gonna preheat my oven to 350. So I'm gonna set that over here. Now I'm going to start by creaming together my butter and sugar. So this is how any cake or cookie recipe starts pretty much. This is room temp butter. That's a stick and a half or 12 tablespoons, 6 ounces. Now the optimal butter temperature for creaming butter and sugar is sort of cool room temperature, like 68 degrees, because at that temperature it's spreadable and malleable, but it's not so warm that it's starting to get like a little greasy. Like that's the temperature at which it holds air the best. So then I'm gonna add my sugar. I have a cup of granulated sugar. I normally make sort of less sweet desserts. I don't want to say unsweet because they all have a certain amount of sweetness. This is on the sweeter end, but having that chocolate in the icing helps to kind of balance everything out. There's just no way around sweet fondant, you know? It's made of sugar. Using my hand mixer, I'm gonna cream all of this together. So basically I wanna beat this. The sugar is gonna cut into the butter and make lots of little tiny air pockets. So this will become sort of light and fluffy. I also have all of my other ingredients at room temperature. The buttermilk has been sitting out of the fridge for a couple hours. The eggs have been out for a few hours. So it's important when you're making any kind of cake or cookie recipe that you want everything to be the exact same temp. So I'm just gonna pause to scrape down the sides of the bowl. It's become quite pale and it's starting to become really fluffy. I'm probably halfway there. When you're using a hand mixer, that creaming usually takes a little bit longer than it does in a stand mixer. So in a stand mixer, if you're using the paddle, which I would use at this point, this could take you, with this quantity of butter and sugar, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. On a hand mixer, it's more like 4. So I'm gonna keep going. I have it on medium high. This is just to help create like a really light texture. How much vanilla? 2 teaspoons vanilla. Okay, I think this looks good. It's definitely gained quite a bit in volume and it's like super light and fluffy. So now I'm gonna add the eggs. If my eggs were cold, or at least colder than the butter, what would happen is I would add those eggs and it would cause the butter to like harden and it would just really lose this like super smooth texture. So by having the eggs and the butter at the same temp, they emulsify really smoothly. So I'm gonna crack one at a time. I'm gonna beat the first one in before I add the second. This is just like straight cake making technique. Creaming, add the eggs, add the vanilla, alternate the wet and dry. Super straightforward. These are our chicken eggs. Look at that yolk. It's positively fluorescent.
What are you feeding them?
Actually, Harris is adding to their feed. First of all, they free range, which I'm very proud of.
Pizza.
Cow. They don't have to know that. We free range them, but Harris has been adding freeze-dried bits of red pepper, like bell pepper, into their feed to try to enhance the yolk color. But I have to say, even before we started doing that, we had very orange yolks. If Harris goes out there with a bag of anything, they follow him around. Yeah. So I added my eggs. I'm gonna add my vanilla extract, so just 2 teaspoons. Close enough. The final piece of putting together the batter is to add my wet and dry ingredients alternating. And you always begin and end with dry. So I'm gonna do 3 additions of dry and 2 additions of wet. My wet ingredient is just my buttermilk. It's a 1/2 cup, again, room temp. So I'm gonna add about 1/3 of the dry. And at this point, you wanna only mix on low because I'm not trying to develop a lot of gluten. I'm using all-purpose flour, not cake flour, because the batter does need to have some structure to it so that it doesn't just totally like spread out like crazy. But we still wanna be gentle with it so that our cookies turn out tender. So I like to mix until I see just a little bit of flour remaining. Then I'm gonna add about 1/2 of the buttermilk. Okay. Again, you can totally do this in a stand mixer, just use the paddle the whole time. 1/2 of the remaining dry, or 1/3 of the total. The remaining wet. So I'm not adding a ton of liquid to this. Like, I'm not making a liquidy cake batter. I'm making a cake batter that is still thick enough that it can hold its shape. So I'm not adding like a ton of liquid. It's just a 1/2 cup. So that's the remaining dry. And I'll mix this until mostly incorporated, and then I like to finish by hand with a spatula just to get everything really evenly mixed. Here I have a thick but super light and fluffy batter dough hybrid, and I'm folding it with the spatula and making sure that I'm scraping the sides and really getting into the bottom and folding to make sure it's evenly mixed. What you don't want is like a part that's more buttery and has less of the dry ingredients worked in, because that particular, like that dough as a cookie is going to spread out a lot. So you want everything even. And now, because I want my black and white cookies to be really tender and have some staying power and to not stale really quickly, like I want a tender, you know, still like moist, not dry cake. This is a fairly soft batter at this point. And so what I want to do is let it rest and chill a little bit so I can handle it more easily. So what I'm going to do is portion it out. I'm going to use my scoop, just like onto a plate, or a parchment lined sheet tray is fine. Then we're going to chill it. And that's going to help that batter firm up so that I can roll it into nice spheres, and that's going to make the sort of most like evenly shaped round cookies. So I'm going to start to portion. You don't have to have a scoop. I just call for 2-ounce portions, which is about 1/4 cup. So you can definitely just use a 1/4 cup measure and like a little spoon or spatula to scrape out the batter. You do not have to work them into any particular shape at this point. You just want to divide up the batter. So that's probably as full as I want to make it. I ran out of space.
Is that allowed?
Sure.
There are no rules.
Yeah, it's allowed if I say it's allowed, Cal. Probably could use a bigger platter. But I have everything portioned out. I want to chill this for like 20 to 25 minutes just so that the batter has a chance to firm up. All of that butter that's in there that's room temp will chill, get a little bit hard, and I'll be able to form the cookies into spheres. So I'm going to stick them in the fridge. Oh, where's this going to go? Is that going to fit? Cut. I have those portioned out pieces of dough on the plate, chilling in the fridge. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab 6 of them from the plate and then throw the rest in the fridge. So I'm just gonna bake 6 at a time. And so this process like takes a couple of batches, but it's easier to work with fewer. and they spread. So I can't really fit more than 6 on a baking sheet at a time. So I'm just gonna grab 6 pieces of dough, and I have a little bit of extra flour here, which helps to roll them out into spheres. They could probably chill a little bit longer because they're still pretty soft, but I should be able to work with these. And 6. So hopefully these aren't too soft. Basically, I'm gonna use some floured hands. I'm just gonna roll these into a sphere. If it's too soft to work with and you're just getting tons of sticking and it's like it's not even holding together, stick it back in the fridge. So I'm spacing them out on my baking sheet. You don't want to use too much flour because you don't want to dry out the surface of the dough. Try to use a light hand. You can tap off excess flour. So now I have my oven preheated. I am going to throw these in the oven just on that center rack, and I want to flatten them slightly so that they're about 3/4 of an inch tall, not too much. And I want to bake them until the centers are matte and springy to the touch. And I might see just a little bit of golden around the edge, but they'll be very, very pale. So I don't want to put a lot of color on them. I just want to let them go until they're set because we want like a nice pale canvas for the icing. And while these are baking, make sure that you have your remaining pieces of dough still chilling. And it's a good idea to cover them so they don't dry out in the fridge. Watch out, kitty cat. You gotta watch out. You gotta watch out, kitty cat. There you go. There's my timer. So this is my second batch. See, I have 6 already done right here. I just took these from the oven. I want to show you a little trick that I have for if you're baking cookies, really any kind of like small round thing for making it really, really circular, which these are mostly circular, but like a little bit irregular. So what you can do while it's still really, really hot, take a large circular cutter. You could do like a large water glass, anything that has, you know, a big enough diameter to fit around the object or the cookie. Put it over it on the baking sheet and like give it a little, make little circular motions. These have been sitting for a minute, so they're not quite hot enough to like take the shape. But for something like a really buttery cookie where it comes out of the oven really soft, this is a great tool for making something like perfectly round. So just set it over top. Make sure you're not cutting off any of the edges. Give it like a little shake. I want to let these cool, but I'm going to go ahead and put together the icing because I can start to put that first layer of icing on my first batch. You just want to let them cool on the baking sheet long enough that when you turn them over to cool fully on the baking rack, you're not like getting really deep grooves because it's really soft. So these have cooled completely. They're like super tender. They have just sort of a little golden color on the bottom, and these are ready to be iced. This recipe is actually a variation on the blue and white cookies in the book, so I'm doing the chocolate version. So I have no lemon juice. Instead, I have milk. So 2 tablespoons milk, 2 tablespoons of corn syrup, some vanilla extract, a little bit of salt, and then later on, I'm going to show you why I'm doing it this way. I'm going to add the cocoa powder. So let me just set this aside. You will also need 2 tablespoons of boiling water. That's kind of important. My confectioner's sugar or powdered sugar is in this bowl. If your sugar has been sitting around for a long time and it's really lumpy, you might want to sift it, but I generally don't have a problem getting any lumps out of sugar just from whisking. So I'm going to add that milk. Again, if you're doing the version in the book, this would be lemon juice. Then I'm going to add the corn syrup. The corn syrup helps to give the icing like a really, really smooth texture and also makes it pretty glossy, which you want. And I'm going to add my teaspoon of vanilla extract, a pinch of salt. That little pinch of salt helps to kind of temper the sweetness a little bit. Now I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of boiling water. So I have my kettle right here. Oh, well, that came out faster than I thought. Okay, so 2 tablespoons of boiling water. Now I want to start to whisk everything. And with confectioner's sugar, you don't want to like go really hard at the very beginning. You want to just go gently, get everything incorporated. And I like to weigh my powdered sugar and really carefully measure my liquid because I want to get that consistent texture every single time. I was going to say I want to get that consistent consistency, but that doesn't really make sense. You want it to be thick because you want it to give a nice, generous coating to the cookie, but you want it to be thin enough that it's going to like settle and dry really smooth. So you might have to make some small adjustments. I actually think this is a really good texture. It's pourable, but it's still kind of thick and ribbony. So now that I have my vanilla, I'm not going to make the chocolate. I'm going to just go all vanilla for now and do a vanilla half on every single cookie that I have. Definitely the best tool for this is your small offset spatula. So what I like to do is I take one cookie at a time, and I like to draw up some of the icing with the spatula. And as it runs down, I like to form a line down the middle of the cookie. You can really ice these in any way you want. The important thing is that you're icing half of it at a time. So I like to take that line and let it kind of run straight down the middle of the cookie. And then I can take the icing, just kind of go around the edge and fill it in. You can go as thick or as thin as you like. You don't want to go too thick because you don't want to add like so much sugar and sweetness to the cookie, but you want just enough to really give it like a nice opaque layer. Just like that. That looks great. And then you're going to set it back on the baking sheet and just go one by one. So see how I'm drawing up the icing, letting that line kind of form a stripe down the middle of the cookie, and I kind of go in on the edge. If you find that the icing is running off the edge of the cookie, that means it's a little bit thin. So you want to add a little bit more powdered sugar. And if you find that it's too thick, add tap water to thin it out, but add it in really small increments. I like to just go like a half teaspoon at a time because a little bit actually goes a long way. I'm gonna go ahead and ice all of my cookies, the ones here and also the ones on my baking sheet once they're cool. And then I'm gonna show you how to do the chocolate half. So now I'm ready to make the chocolate icing, and I'm just using the vanilla and adding cocoa powder to it. So it's like a nice sort of streamlined way to do it. You don't need two separate bowls. You can really add cocoa to taste. It's up to you. But I have 2 tablespoons here, so this is what I'm gonna start with. And I will have to add a little bit of extra water to thin it out because that cocoa is gonna tighten up the texture. So in this goes, again, if you have really lumpy cocoa powder, which sometimes happen because it's so fine, go ahead and sift it beforehand. If you really want like a really dark icing, you can use something called black cocoa, which is like a super alkaline cocoa that will make a very, very dark, basically nearly black color. You can use tap water to thin it out. You don't need the boiling water. So I'm gonna add maybe a half teaspoon. See what that does. Cocoa, I think, is a better tool than like melted chocolate because there's no sugar added. So having that chocolate, that cocoa as a bitter counterpoint to the sugar, I think is really important. I'm gonna add maybe just a smidge more cocoa. I do recommend using a Dutch processed cocoa. It's not important for like the chemistry of the recipe at all. It's just gonna give you a deeper flavor and a darker color. That was probably an extra half tablespoon. I don't think it needed it, but I just wanted it for the extra color and flavor. So I'm gonna add another little bit of water. This color and texture looks good to me. So let's do that test. Where is it gonna fluidly fall off the whisk, but still give a little bit of a ribbon on the surface? I think we're good. You'll also know that if you kind of give it a stir and let it sit, watch the surface of the icing, it should kind of settle down into a flat layer. I think that you would have to add so much of like, you know, the kind of cocoa you can buy in the grocery store, you'd have to add an exorbitant amount and it's just gonna throw off the texture. So for that really dark color, go with black cocoa, but I don't think it's necessary. If you're drying up and you're not getting a long fluid line, you might want to add a little bit more liquid. I mean, the black of my cookie is still, it's not black. It's brown.
Is it not? The black and white cookie on Wikipedia is black.
Let me see.
I thought you'd never ask.
There is black food coloring though. I will say that that's a thing.
Maybe it's squid ink.
Ew, squid ink. No, thank you, please. Okay. So now I'm going to go back in and I'm going to use that exact same icing technique that I used for the vanilla with the chocolate, and just handle them carefully because you don't want to like squeeze the cookie because you might crack that smooth finish of the vanilla. When I draw up with the spatula, I get like a nice long line. So now I think this is the perfect texture for the second half of the icing. So now I'm just going to go ahead and do the second half of the remaining cookies all with that chocolate layer of chocolate icing. So I'm just kind of following that line that I laid before.
What happens if you mess one up? Scrape it all off?
Yeah,
or is it
you
ruined?
can basically scrape it off. Especially, it's easier with the vanilla because it won't like color the cookie at all.
If you did one that was all white, could you do like drops of the chocolate and do swirls?
Yeah, but you'd have to do that before the icing sets. So I maybe missed my window. If you get any drips, just scrape them off.
You don't like the drips?
I don't love the drips. So I went ahead and finished the chocolate side. These had time to set. The icing is still really, really glossy even though it's drying, and that's what you get from adding just that little bit of corn syrup. It looks super glossy and appealing and pretty and like has that beautiful smooth finish. These stale quickly, so it is the kind of thing where you really ideally want to eat them the day that they're made. And they'll keep in an airtight container just at room temperature, but definitely the day they're made is when they're optimal. So I'm gonna break one apart. You can see they're so like soft and fluffy on the inside. They're not hard, they're not dry at all. I really feel like the best black and white cookie is when you make it home. So I'm gonna taste. I kind of like to get a bite that gets a little bit of chocolate and a little bit of vanilla. So tender, so fluffy. You get kind of that scent of vanilla from the cake. It's just really good. Delish. Weren't people saying more cow?
Yeah, more cow.
It needs milk, doesn't it?
It would be good with milk.
Or do you want iced coffee with it? How much have you had today?
7 or 8 cups. Like 7 or 8 cups of coffee. It tastes like a cupcake.
Yeah, it's very cakey and not dry.
It's good.
It's good, right?
How does it compare to the ones that you have at a bakery that have been sitting there for 48 hours?
I've had enough bad black and white cookies that I just see them and I don't even. I wouldn't even eat one. But very kid friendly.
Right? You could eat this. You could definitely eat more than one without even thinking about it, and then realize you just had like a ton of sugar. Not a ton, but you know what I mean. So this is my classic New York black and white cookie. In the book, I have a little bit of a spin on it. It's my blue and white that are like lemon and blueberry, a great variation. It's a really fun cookie to make. Is it cake? Is it cookie? Doesn't matter. I think it's cake. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.
Cut!